According to the mid-May figures from the U.S. Labor Department, 36.5 million American citizens have filed unemployment claims over the past 8 weeks since the COVID-19 crisis effectively forced the shutdown of large parts of the United States economy. The overall unemployment rate was up to 14.7% in April, the worst figures on record since monthly jobless statistics began to be compiled in 1948. The Washington Post had noted that the single-month job loss statistics represented the wiping out of a whole decade of labor market growth and was roughly equivalent to the total rate of job destruction experienced by the U.S. during the 2007 to 2009 financial crisis. The number of jobs lost more than doubles the number seen in the 2007 to 2009 Great Recession, when 8.7 million Americans lost jobs. Before the pandemic, the United States marked a 50-year unemployment low in February, with just 3.5% of Americans unemployed. According to USA Today, of the millions of jobs lost, 18 million are expected to be temporary when the pandemic recedes. Restaurants, bars, travel, and retails are the hardest hit sectors, though 40 states are now in the process of reopening parts of the economy. Economists warn recovery is not expected for many months or even years. Things didn't get better as the number of Americans who have lost their jobs by the end of May soared to more than 40 million as the number of unemployment claims continued to rise, with 2.1 million people filing for unemployment in a week. The staggering job losses marked a grim milestone in the economic crisis that had gripped the U.S. since the coronavirus triggered widespread shutdowns and stay-at-home orders in an effort to halt the spread of the deadly pandemic. The late May figures from the Department of Labor showed that the rate of new unemployment claims had continued to fall down from its peak in early April, when 6.6 million Americans filed for unemployment in a single week. Earlier in May, the department reported that more than 20 million Americans lost their jobs in April, which brought the unemployment rate to 14.7%, up from 4.4% in March. While the growth of unemployment claims has slowed, millions more have continued to file for unemployment each week, bringing the total number of unemployed to a disastrous rate not seen since the Great Depression. Job losses have hit virtually every industry, though some harder than others. Figures from the Department of Labor in May showed the leisure and hospitality industry was the hardest hit, with 4.8 million jobs lost, nearly a 40% unemployment rate. As traveling came to a halt with shutdown measures, millions of education and health services, retail, and manufacturing jobs were also cut. Even months after shutdown orders were put in place, the reported unemployment figures may not show a complete picture of how many people were laid off due to the crisis. About 3 in 10 Americans have lost a job or taken a pay cut due to COVID-19. Americans who have lost their job or taken a pay cut due to the outbreak are nearly twice as likely as those who have not experienced either to see the coronavirus pandemic as a threat to their own personal financial situation. About 6 in 10 adults who lost their job or wages, 61%, say the outbreak is a threat to their personal finances, compared with a third of Americans who have not experienced this, 33%. Roughly 9 in 10 Americans, regardless of employment status, say the outbreak is a major threat to the U.S. economy, 88% and 89% respectively. Overall, nearly 1 in 5 Americans, 17%, say they have lost their job as a result of the coronavirus outbreak, and about a quarter of Americans, 23%, say they had to take a cut in pay due to reduced hours or demand for their work. 10% of Americans say they experienced both a pay cut and job loss. About 1 in 5 say someone else in their immediate household lost their job, 18%, or lost wages, 22%. In total, 43% of Americans say they or someone in their household has lost a job or wages. Job and wage losses continue to be felt more acutely by some groups than others. Hispanic adults, 43%, particularly those born outside the U.S., are among the most likely to say they've personally experienced pay cuts or job loss due to the coronavirus outbreak, as are those ages 18 to 29, 40%, adults with lower incomes, 36%, and those with a high school degree or less, 33%. Fortunately, there was some good news in September as things seemed to be getting back in shape. U.S. employers brought back 661,000 workers in September, according to U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics figures released Friday. The unemployment rate clocked in at 7.9%, down from 8.4% in August. About half of the jobs lost to the pandemic have returned. The problem, economists say, is that the pace of recovery is slowing. Going forward, we may see only incremental employment gains at best, at least until the virus is completely under control. Massive layoffs planned by major companies in the coming days and weeks are also likely to take a toll. The big job gains over the summer were the result of furloughed workers coming back to their jobs when local economies reopened. For example, the Cheesecake Factory announced at the end of August that it had brought back just about all of the 41,000 staffers who were unable to work when lockdowns began in March. The company's permanent layoffs totaled just 175. But employment gains from reopening were easy. Now, companies that are suffering deeper fundamental impacts from the pandemic, in sectors like travel, hospitality, and energy, are now adjusting to a new normal. In many cases, that means permanent cuts. Several major corporations announced huge layoffs in recent days: 28,000 at Disney, 3,600 at Ralph Lauren, 3,800 at Allstate Insurance, 2,000 at Marathon Petroleum, 31,000 at American Airlines and United Airlines combined. The labor market is losing momentum as 10.7 million Americans are still out of work compared with February. About 1.5 million people filed initial unemployment claims last week, according to BLS data released yesterday, either through their state or through the federal Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, which was designed for gig workers like Uber drivers. Those who have lost their jobs may find it even tougher than usual to find a new one, given that they're competing with more than 10 million other unemployed Americans. Some businesses had been using federal stimulus programs like the CARES Act, passed in March, as a backstop, but provisions of the law have expired or will expire by year's end, including layoff protections for aviation workers that ran through the end of September. As a result, airlines that accepted Washington's financial help have been free to lay off workers since Thursday. Air carriers have urged Congress to pass another round of aid. Both American Airlines and United Airlines have pledged to reverse course on their furloughs if such help materializes. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on Friday asked airlines to pause layoffs, promising industry-specific help is on the way. But even if the airlines get more help, it's unlikely a broader relief bill will pass Congress. The Democratic-controlled House of Representatives on Thursday passed a $2.2 trillion coronavirus relief bill, which includes some aid for small businesses. But the legislation, which doesn't have bipartisan congressional support and is opposed by the White House and Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin, is a non-starter in the Republican-led Senate. The continued unemployment crisis, compounded by massive layoffs, could have serious economic consequences even for those Americans fortunate enough to remain employed. If people don't get back to work, it could dampen consumer spending, which accounts for 2/3 of U.S. GDP. Less spending could in turn trigger even more layoffs, potentially causing a downward spiral. If you are yet to like and subscribe, please do so immediately to avoid missing future videos. Stay savvy.